Welcome to this program of Frontiers, a program that we aim to discuss issues affecting society, not just discussing the issues, but proposing solutions that can be worked out in our society for Malawi to become a better nation. Today you are with me, Ezelina Kamaliza. I am not alone in this program. I'm also joined by panelists. If we are to define quality education, what would we define it as?
Yeah, quality education comes from the quality management theory, which means that something of quality is something that is fit for purpose. So when we come to education, quality education should make the learners who have passed through that system to be fit for purpose, meaning that they'll have to acquire the relevant knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, which will make them relevant to society, but also be able to develop themselves personally. So for that process to happen, there has to be a conducive learning environment. And the conducive learning environment means we should have qualified or competent teachers who are disseminating knowledge through the active learning pedagogy, but also who have really learned what it takes to teach someone. So in a nutshell, I would say quality education should really be relevant to the society and should develop in individuals the cognitive skills so that they are responsive to society.
You've spoken of having a conducive learning environment. Now to you, Mr. Mafulirwa, looking at Malawi's education system, are we getting the quality education?
I don't think so. We have tried our best in terms of providing education. Yes, we have, but not really quality education. In addition to what my colleague has just said, I think quality education should be understood in the sense of, yes, the environment, also the material, and the content of what we are teaching to the learners. So I think if we look at the content, we find that most of the materials that we learn here in Malawi is not really good to be in the sense to say quality education, because he also mentioned that fit for purpose. Our education has to achieve something in the society, especially the challenges that we are facing. But I think our education is not up to date in terms of that purpose to say can we develop economically, can we develop politically, can we develop socially. You look at the students that graduate, you find they cannot do anything. From polytechnic, you find they are failing to design things that can help Malawi grow as a nation in terms maybe agricultural inventions, technological inventions, but we are learning, and then we tend to want to say, what are we really learning? So I think we also need to work on that as a country. In terms of the materials, like the classrooms, I hear that we are now having double intake at Chancellor College, but we don't have the infrastructure to accommodate these institutions. I was there. We were actually learning from the corridors. So can you call that quality education? I think we are not really doing enough in terms of that, yeah.
So now to you, Mr. Manyozo.
Yes.
If you are to give a comparison,
Okay.
I'm putting it now to primary school education,
All right.
between private and public institutions, who are getting the best?
Well, I would say, okay, I'm trying to look at both sides. Let's look at private schools, for example. To begin with, I shouldn't come here and say that all private schools are good, okay? Because I'm going back to the time when, I think it was around 1994, when there was a bit of liberalization in the education sector, where every house was kind of turned into a classroom. I think we remember those times. So every person who had a house or believed they could teach, they would set up a school. And those were the private schools that we kind of set up. So we can also look at those private schools and see, are they really providing the quality of education that is there? There are some that are really providing the quality of education, some are not. When it comes to the government schools, most of the schools, at least those that are the ones that I've visited, there is an issue of teacher and student ratio. You have students that are learning under a tree, for example. So, and it gets interesting because this is why for me I call it a rain-fed education. And I'm saying this because during rainy season, the students that are learning under a tree cannot learn under a tree. So they have to kind of cut it a little bit until when at least the rains are gone, the ground is at least dry, and the students can now go back to learning. So that to me is not something that is conducive. Talking about teachers, for example, he talked about having competent teachers. I would also add an element of having teachers that are properly paid, and not only properly paid, but they're also paid on time. When you look at the minimum wage, for example, are teachers in Malawi getting, I'm not talking about getting millions, but are they getting the minimum wage based on the country? 2, are they getting their payment in time? At least from the time that I can remember. If there are people that have been complaining about their salaries not coming on time, or not getting their increment, or not getting their arrears on time, they are teachers. We make promises, but then when it comes to fulfilling those promises, there are challenges. There are hardship allowances. Are they getting them? Why do we even put them in the first place when we know that we cannot really give such kind of incentives to teachers? So for me, it also goes to looking at a teacher as a person in the first place. They have human rights as well. So we're talking about rights to fair labor practices. Are they getting what they're supposed to be getting? So when you look at all that, on top of that as well, teaching and learning materials. You go to schools where a teacher has a photocopy of a photocopied teacher's guide. I've seen it with my 2 eyes. So these are the people that are supposed to be training our learners in primary school, but they don't even have original copies of teacher's guide. Why they don't have original copies, I don't know, but they don't have original copies. Have you been to a staff room of primary school before? You look at that condition. Does it even motivate someone to go to school? So these are things that really need to be addressed. And some are actually in areas that are in Milongo, not even far away. There are schools that are in Milongo, very close to town. But when you look at the conditions, staff room, teacher-student ratio, you find that they leave a lot to be desired. So I think there's a lot of work that has to be done.
Okay, so Malawi as a country, we've had so many development strategies. We've had the Vision 2020, we are 3 years away right now. So I'd like us, for this moment, just to focus on the Vision 2020. Mr. Sapato, looking at the Vision 2020 and where we are right now in terms of education, because if we look at education, it's a core aspect for any type of development. Are we making progress?
Well, I think progress is there, but it's slow in the sense that there are certain targets that we gave ourselves as a country. For instance, one of the key elements for quality education is to have qualified teachers. And the measure for that, we call it the teacher-pupil ratio, whereby internationally we agree that one teacher should not handle more than 40 pupils. Okay, and I think when the Vision 2020 was designed, we had set a target of achieving that by 2015. But as of today, the teacher-pupil ratio is almost 1:80. Okay, that is on average. But you also have some schools where you have one teacher handling maybe 200 pupils, and in an environment also where maybe at a school with 600 pupils there is only one teacher. So we would say that we are really far from that. Of course, when you are in town, you have schools which have really a very good teacher-pupil ratio, even some below 1:40. Which is really a good thing. So I would say that we still have a way to go, and I think projections I will not be able to achieve that target by 2020. We've drawn close, but I think we are still far. And again, the other element is of ensuring that we have teaching and learning materials that are adequate. Yeah, ideally you should have one textbook per pupil, but you would find that in some schools 10 pupils are using one textbook in English or mathematics, science, and so on. This is also a challenge. Every year we are trying to provide funds or resources to procure textbooks, but we still have challenges in terms of achieving the targets. So we still have some ground to cover to be able to achieve Vision 2020. But I can emphatically say that by 2020 we will not be able to achieve all the key elements of that vision. We'll still have some work to do. Probably maybe we need another Vision 2040 to be able to achieve what we aspire as of today. Yes.
Right. So you've spoken of allocations being made to the education sector to provide for all that is needed in the sector. Mr. Manyoso, is the government doing justice to the delivery of these allocations that are being made?
The quick answer would be no. And I would want to get deep into it because I think education financing is another topic that needs to be re-looked at. And if we're talking about education financing, I think we need to understand a bit of the international instruments on what is required for Malawi. Okay? If you look at, say, for example, the International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, especially Article 13, which talks about free primary education. So you're talking about compulsory primary education and free primary education, and they're talking about also secondary education, which makes sure that almost everyone has access, and we progressively move to free secondary education. And then there's also talk about tertiary education and also progressively moving towards free tertiary education. The first question is, with an economy like Malawi, do we have resources to support a free primary, secondary, and tertiary education? And look at it in the context of, we're not only talking about free education, we're also talking about free health services and many other free things. And from my experience, we don't really like paying tax. If there was a way of going away with tax or paying little tax, we'd take it. Which now looks at, okay, where are we going to be getting these resources? The next thing is donors. Are donors really forthcoming now when it comes to education financing? Mr. Sabat is going to guide us on that question. But I mean, we all know that donors are also now focusing on their local priorities. There are countries that are going through financial crisis, so they have now more obligations back home because even the education systems in some countries are not working. So their financing to the education sector now is focused more on home as compared to financing other countries. Now, is the government doing enough? So the question is based on which standard? Is it the standard of the international standards where we have quotas where the government is supposed to allocate money, or based on the resources that we get as a country, are we putting a very good chunk of that money in the education sector? I think that should be the question for me. Yes, I'll stop there.
Maybe I can add to what he has said. Say indeed, and I think right now we have a development framework which goes to 2030. That is the Sustainable Development Goals. And for education, countries are being urged to allocate between 15 and 20% of their budget towards education, and between 4 to 6% of their GDP to education as well. But countries that are low income, like Malawi, we are supposed to focus on the upper end of that. So for Malawi, we should allocate a minimum of 20% of the national budget. If you look at the 2017-18 budget, I think we are around 18%, which is 2 percentage points below what is expected as a minimum. So indeed, we need to do more. But also, I think needing to do more means that we should be creative and innovative. I think for more than 50 years, we've been relying on donor support, providing at least 40% of the budget to education. I think we have now, it should be a collective responsibility. It's difficult to achieve 100% free education. It's very difficult. So households need to make a contribution towards especially tertiary education or secondary education. We have adopted a free primary education policy, so we may not go back and say parents should be forced to pay, although practically through school development funds and other mechanisms, parents are still being forced to make a little contribution. But there has to be some contribution from households towards education. After all, education, the social returns are both on society, but even at individual level. That is one. Two, I think as a country, we need to look inside and see potential areas for mobilizing more domestic resources without relying on donor support. Because if we rely on donor support and 40% is coming from there, once that 40% is removed, then it means we'll be in trouble. There are a lot of emerging innovative mechanisms which the country can try to learn from how other countries are doing. For example, one of them is bond financing, and bond financing includes also attracting bonds from those in the diaspora because of these remittances from the diaspora people. They are becoming more than the collection of all the donor support. And secondly, I think we have alumni movements that are assisting schools. We are seeing a lot of articles, posts on alumni have contributed so many millions to their school so that they construct a new classroom block or buy teaching and learning materials. I think this is also an innovative mechanism. The other thing, of course, as he mentioned, the issue of taxes. Are we paying enough taxes? But also maybe the other question that can be raised is everyone who is supposed to pay taxes pay? You'll find that the way the tax regime is done is focusing more on the formal sector, and most of the businesses are in the informal sector. So I think we need to look at that. Secondly, we have unnecessary incentives being paid to multinational companies or businesses. They're exempted from tax, and I think that is also one area which we can look at. But also just generally enforcing that everyone pays. The TVET, the technical education area, they have what is called TVET levy, which is 1% over the salary. According to sources from TVETA, which is the authority responsible for that, companies are providing just 50% of what is supposed to be paid. So if the other 50% were paid, that could help. And public institutions are even failing to get 1% of what they are supposed to provide under TVET levy. So these are some areas where we can look at and ensure that there is creativity, innovation in financing. Because without financing, we will not have enough trained teachers, we will not have adequately motivated teachers, because the salaries, the living grants, they'll come from funds. If we don't have funds, we can't provide that. The teaching and learning materials, they come from funds. If we don't have funds, we can't guarantee one textbook per pupil. So I just wanted to add that financing is really critical if we are to ensure quality education, because quality is not cheap.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sapato. We'll go for a short break, and when we come back, we are going to be looking at the monitoring of the education that is being provided in our schools in Malawi. Stay with us. back to Frontiers, and in this program today I'm also joined by panelists as we discuss the education sector. I have Mr. Mwafulira, who is Executive Director of the Invest in Youth Initiative, and also Mr. Limbani Nsapato, Country Representative for Educans, and also Mr. Chimwemwe John Paul Manyozo. Welcome back to the second segment of the program. Now, looking at inspection of our education system, both public and private. Are you satisfied, Mr. Mafuli?
The quick answer to that is that no, I'm not. Because we say we inspect schools, but then why do we still have this kind of mess? We may have some problems, but not at this level. I think it's very serious. Especially, I think my friend Paul, he mentioned that every house was turned into a school. Okay, and then you look at the environment. You cannot have a school very close to a pub. It's happening, especially here in town. Okay, so what kind of inspection are we talking about? Yes, there have been some inspections, but I think on higher institutions where we have seen some universities or colleges closing because they said they were not offering up-to-date materials, and maybe they have some other problems, they're not registered and things like that. But I think we need to do more, even in terms of the kind of education that they are offering to learners, especially in terms of environment. Education, especially me, I take education as a very serious issue that a nation has to handle. So I think in terms of inspection, we also need to look at the environment and then the content. Don't forget the content that these learners are getting.
Mr. Manyozo, you seem interested.
Yeah, I'm very interested. Because for me, I think when it comes to inspection, you inspect to see if something is living up to standards. He's there to guide us on what standards. Because there seems also to be a mix-up on what are standards and what are not standards. Number two, it's after we do inspection, what's next? And if we say, for example, if we find a school that is not meeting up to the standards, and we say, let's close the school, do we have another school in that area that meets the standards that is going to be providing that service to the students? I'll give you an example of Kasung. There's a certain school in Kasung, I will not mention the name. In that school, they have a self-boarding kind of facility. The structure that they're using used to be, a tobacco shelter that the chief kind of donated because the girls were walking a longer distance. The school is very close to Kasungu National Park, so they were passing through the national park, and it was, dangerous. Girls were raped and all that kind of stuff. So they provided the shelter. Everybody looked at the shelter and said, this is a structure that is not conducive for girls to be sleeping in this environment. Close by, there's a clinic. Same situation. I think it used to be some office, and then it was turned into a clinic. Even when women are delivering and stuff, it's just messed up, in short. The thing is, the first thing that you're going to say is, let's close the structure. But when you close that structure, what are you going to provide as an alternative to be providing services to the people that are living in that area? So for me, it's not an issue when it comes to inspection. I think it's an issue of also looking at it in the context of where are you doing the inspection. And if we say, okay, these are the standards, what happens when you have a whole, just for argument's sake, a whole district that has about 100 schools, but only 25 seem to meet the standards? What happens to those students? And then we'll go back to the whole issue of we are moving towards making sure that almost everybody has access to education. I guess that's why we even introduced primary education. So we have made sure that almost everybody is in school. We have introduced a school feeding program. People are still coming to school and the numbers are increasing. And then you say, okay, this infrastructure is not living up to standards, therefore we have to close the school. So it's kind of a back and forth thing for me.
All right, so I was looking at a report by UNESCO that showed that in 2012, the enrollment in primary school was about 3,600 students. We get to secondary school, the figure drops drastically.
Okay.
Now we have about 1,100 students.
Okay.
We get to completion, that's junior secondary.
Yes.
We get to Form 3 and Form 4, we have 119 students.
Okay.
So now, in terms of people joining school
Yes.
and being able to complete education in Malawi, what can we do, Mr. Sabat, to have?
Yeah, I think that is a retention issue, which would be achieved by a number of factors. I think one of the factors is that we should have our infrastructure right, because basically, if the sieving is starting from preschool up to the university, where I think the access rate is really very low. It means the expectations are also low. Okay, and secondly, quality issues within the schools, because the way our system is, you progress from one level to another after passing the examinations. Now, if you are not of quality, of high quality, it means you cannot pass the primary school exams, you cannot pass the Malawi school certificate examinations, and then you will also fail to make it at the university entrance examinations. So I think that one is also very critical to ensure that people can progress. But I think the infrastructure one is really great, because if, for example, we are only selecting 1,000 plus students who have written Form 4 examinations, maybe there are around 400,000 who have written those exams, and we only take 1,000 to go to the university. It means we are really limiting. So, one, let's work on the infrastructure, expand that, but also provide other modes of delivery, like online, open distance learning that is also being used. These days are days of new technology. Let us make use of new technology so that we don't get restricted to the brick and mortar type of environment. And then let us provide quality education. Let's have quality and motivated teachers. Let's also ensure that we have adequate teaching and learning materials. Let's ensure that the infrastructure that is there is also conducive, so that we avoid accidents within the school environment. Let us also address violence, school-related gender-based violence, which affect some students, like girls, for example, from proceeding. So I think it's a whole package of interrelated factors which affect people's retention to proceed from one stage to another, which we need to address as a country.
Just to add, I think what I've discovered in Malawi that we like free things a lot. We can actually die for the free thing in Malawi. If we look at the trend, you mentioned that it's higher in the primary education, probably because it's free. Because in most of the secondary schools we pay, and then we go to the tertiary education, we really pay. So I think maybe I have to look at it from a business point of view, that there's a business opportunity here. Financing. I think we have to find a way of financing the education system in Malawi. I will be a bit radical, but I stand to be corrected. We do have a body that oversees the loan scheme, but I think it's not really privatized. So they started that process of privatizing education system in Malawi, I think, in the college, but they have privatized something that is not really necessary, like food, something like that. But we really need to finance the education itself. So if we can have a private firm that is financing maybe even the fees, to say, okay, you are going to owe us, we are going to pay your fees, so you will be paying to us. I think people can repay the loan, but if it's the government disbursing the loans, people are not going to pay because they think it's free. You see? So I think if we can also have that, I'm not saying we should remove the government in the whole picture, but we need that private firm, like really private, that is disbursing the loans. and managing those loans. I think people can, even students can work harder to say, this money I'm going to pay back. Yes.
Mr. Manyoso,
Yes.
what Mr. Mwafuliro has just said brings me to the issue of mindset.
Yes.
As Malawians, how best do we accommodate the fact that it's not everything that comes away that is for free? We've seen other countries, we're both at developing level, but they've gone ahead of us. And the people in those countries are quite comfortable paying for the services.
Yes.
Services being provided by government and people paying for them. Not exorbitant prices, no, but at least for the thing, for the projects to be maintained and to continue to run.
Yes.
What do we do with our mindset?
For me, it starts with the politics, the political system itself, because the political machinery works on freebies, if I may call them. Okay, if I want to campaign to be a member of parliament, one of the things I'm going to tell people is I'm going to give you a road, I'm going to give you a school. I say I'll give you, and that's the language that's used most of the times. And as comfortable as you get it, like, oh, there's somebody who's doing everything for me, all I have to do is sit. And this is what is used mostly when it comes to the campaigns. So over time, we have been taken into this attitude of we are going to receive, we're going to receive, what I call a folded hand syndrome. Even when you look at, there are some social programs, for example, social protection programs, for example. Some, for me, they make sense. Others kind of don't. One of them is, what you call it, Food for Work. And I'll tell you what, Food for Work is a very good program on one side. On the other side, it has a mentality of building an attitude of, okay, the road is messed up. We use this road every day. We want an ambulance to come to our area. But we know that there's massive money coming the next 2 weeks. So what do? You're not going to touch that road. Because when you start working on that road, you're missing out on the massive money. And I've listened to this like firsthand with the people that are working in this program. We're doing an assessment of local development funds where people wait. Sometimes they even work in messing up different kind of facilities because they know there is something that is going to come as a reward, So it's something that, for me, starts with the political system. Even if you have, say, for example, the president and ministers in their address in the same way that they did with the HIV and AIDS message, where you had a head of state who had a message that was they were using at almost every political rally. That should be able to tell people that, guys, I think we are done with receiving free stuff. But that is doing a career suicide because you know that you have the new things as a new strategy for campaign. So it starts for me with the political system. I might even go to church. Churches, to me, are places that a lot of Malawians go to. I'm yet to find if very few really go to churches and mosques. At least it's different from the other countries where the numbers are reduced. Is there that spirit of saying, you know what, guys, we need to start working on things in churches? Or all we have to do is wait. There are a lot of clips, especially now in a lot of African countries, of people that are literally being manipulated because they still believe that if the people are independent, these are the owners of the churches. If the people become independent and start working on their own, they will stop coming to my church. So they'll create this dependency syndrome where you constantly have to be going to this particular person. That's another issue.
Yeah, maybe another issue would be at our curriculum, because curriculum is very critical, and one element that we have within the curriculum is that one, I think it fails to ensure that after going through the curriculum, you become self-reliant. So self-reliance is one critical thing, because if you can rely on yourself, you'll not wait for someone to come and give you water to pay for all your school fees, your health, or whatever. I think that is one element that we need. Then the other thing is also the kind of system where we are trained to be employed one day, not to create jobs and employ others. I think that spirit of entrepreneurship needs to be promoted within our curriculum, because once it's promoted, then you can rely on yourself, you create a business, you use what you learn in the Polytechnic to start designing. I think what the policy environment would require is a conducive business environment, ensuring that the legal and policy framework is supportive of that kind of structure. So we really need to interrogate our curriculum and advocate for changes that will ensure that the content promotes self-reliance, the content promotes creativity and innovation, but also as a nation we should be able to reward and acknowledge creativity and innovation. The stories of Kankwamba and the others who have shown creativity, but they are not fully supported. Instead, maybe they are supported by outside countries rather than us. Some are being arrested. I think there was someone who was inventing a helicopter or something. I think they ran into his way, and I don't know what is happening. So we should reward creativity, but most importantly, I think the entrepreneurial mind, that we shouldn't just go in the school so that at the end we'll be wearing suits, ties like this, no. But we should also be prepared for blue-collar jobs. And that is why promotion of skills development, technical education is critical. And I think the agenda of coming up with the community technical colleges is good, but it needs to be supported by adequate finances, but also preparing the communities to own that kind of initiative, and even the young people, so that at least the young people can be motivated to enroll in those colleges. So from religion, from the politics to the curriculum, I think these are areas that we need to look at so that things can move. Because we also start at the household level, Because when you're in the house and you just say, oh, the dad will always provide everything. When the wife tries to empower herself to bring some resources into the house, sometimes women really fought against. And then when the children try to become creative, it becomes also a challenge. So empowerment and mindset should also start at household level, because I think the family is the nucleus of whatever we have at national level.
Yeah. Just to add on the mindset, I think we have to change our minds, first of all, in terms of the free things, like Paul said. It's very simple, common sense. If you want something quality, you need to pay for it. You cannot go to a shop and then you say, I want iPhone 7 or 6, and then you have 20 questions. It's not going to work. Okay? Yes, if we want quality things, we have to be ready to pay for it. If we want free things, then we have to expect mediocre things. That's it. There's no one is going to pay for what we want, something quality. No. So as a country, we need to say, okay, we want quality education, all of us, not just the government, but all of us, even parents. Because parents, I think I saw it on the social media, the parents were saying, no, the fees is just too exorbitant. But they are looking for something quality. It's not going to come. They have to be ready to pay for this quality education. And then the other mindset is going to the parents. Our education system is defined by what our parents think. If you go to school, you learn maybe dancing or music, and then parents become disappointed to see, what are you doing? What are you doing? But that kind of thing is making a lot of money in other countries, Western countries. You see? So we are limiting ourselves with the kind of education that we want. If I'm an accountant, it means I'm going to get a lot of money. If I become a lawyer, I'm going to be a very big person in town. But then you look at flooding the market, the job market. Everybody wants to be an accountant, and then there are no jobs for accountants anymore. So we need to give ourselves more opportunities, more options to say, well, if I go to school, and then we have to define education. Education is not just a certificate or a qualification for you to get a job. You need knowledge. Education is about knowledge, especially generating new knowledge, not getting the knowledge that old people were learning in 1960. We're still learning. But I think we should be able, with knowledge, we should be able to say, okay, this is what learning, they call it learning, not just being introduced to some sort of ideas, but you have to get something out of what you learn and then do something beautiful, something different. That's what we call education. So I think we need to consider on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mwafulira. On a light note, Mr. Sabat, looking at those of us that are here, you've lived longer than than us. You know, comparing the way the education system was, I would say, before multi-party, before democracy, because I think with the coming in of democracy, that's when there was a big change in so many systems in our country. Back then, people had to pay a little levy for the education. Would you say that maybe completely scrapping it off just at once like that, just at once that's going free, might have contributed to some of the problems we're going through?
I think the challenge was that we did not prepare, because education is a system, and it is also a process which requires a number of ingredients for it to really work and to achieve the quality that we are all looking for. So I think someone just said, let there be free education, and then the next day we find, okay, now we have these millions of children. Where do they go? And people are turning their houses into classrooms. We need teachers. Where do we get them? So any volunteer on the in the village. Okay, I remember that time there used to be poverty teachers. You see, yeah. So I think we did not do proper planning. But also after experiencing the problems, we did not really move in quickly to ensure that we provided the adequate resources required in the education system. So as a result, people have taken free primary education as a bad thing, as a burden to our country, because we didn't plan properly, and two, we did not have the resources to be able to finance that kind of education. And then I think the element of over-relying on external people to finance us, I think that has also been a very big challenge, because when those donors started withdrawing their funds, it meant that we didn't have adequate resources to be able to move ahead. So I think let's have really a second type of independence, economic independence, academic independence also, so that then we plan properly. We should be ready to use domestic resources to finance our education. Households should be able to provide and finance the education of their children, because what I've seen here is there has been hypocrisy, especially in higher education, whereby you see the same students who were paying a lot of money in private secondary schools, they suddenly become poor when they are selected to go to the university, just because they want free things there. And you find that they're in the forefront making noise, advocating for closure, unless the fees are reduced. This is the challenge that we have. At least if it were the poor people who were learning in the rural areas and they found it really tough to get into the university, then those ones is when we said no. Everything may not be free, but the loans will be there, provided to you, so that you access them and access quality education. You shouldn't be denied your right to education because of lack of resources. I think this is something that we need to look at as a country, change the mindset, be ready to do something much better. If you want quality education, you should be ready to pay for it. Yeah.
All right, on that note, let's go to another short break and then we'll continue with our program. to the final segment of our program today, Frontiers. As we already said, we are discussing education in Malawi. Now, moving forward from here, we've looked at so many challenges rocking our education system. But now we look at the strikes, we look at maybe government and other stakeholders giving different responses on one particular issue in the education sector. How best do we move forward as a country, Mr. Sapa?
Yeah, I think as of now, we are at a good point because the National Education Sector Plan is coming to an end this year because the National Education Sector Plan is the medium-term strategy to implement long-term strategies. So let's develop a new comprehensive, robust strategy that takes into account the issues that we are addressing, the recurring issues about the curriculum, about the teachers, about financing, about management, and so on. And these should be adequately financed so that then we can move ahead. The other thing is that I think we need to be proactive in addressing issues. So for example, maybe within the university, there needs to be some form of structured mechanism for anticipating that the issues will come up and then try to address them. This is part of risk management, which maybe in our universities, it doesn't get treated adequately. But I know that in the business sector, they try to address, but I would wish if risk management was addressed holistically in each and every department of the university should handle that so that we can address. But also the issue of entrepreneurship, I think this is very key because it helps in enhancing creativity. It also helps in changing the mindset so that you can rely on yourself and your business, create opportunities for others rather than just looking for opportunities. We have to do a lot of civic education on the community so that households understand that if they want quality education, then quality education is not cheap. They have to be ready to pay for it. Time for receiving things for free is really gone. Now we have to create resources. But also the little resources that we have to support education, we should use them properly. That's why it is good to see that maybe there are initiatives from civil society that are monitoring the budget, tracking public expenditure, exposing the ills that are happening there, like maybe if there is leakage of resources or there is corruption, theft of materials, those need to be highlighted so that we maximize on the little resources that we have. At the same time, promoting that we should be more creative and look at the domestic resources for enhancing our financing of education.
Yes, I think I'll build on the issue of leakage. Also on the communities mostly. I'm looking at, say for example, infrastructure which is built using local development funds. You find that there are some school blocks that have been built using the local development fund. When you're about to launch the school block, some have not even been completed, but in the documents it's shown that they have been completed. And when you go deeper, you discover that some community members decided to help themselves with the bags of cement. For example, you had 100, somehow you find that they have used 85. You know, you start to ask around, people are like, I know I'm a volunteer. So as a volunteer, where are you going to get your pay? So even within the communities itself, there should be an element of ownership when it comes to building of such infrastructures. We have money that we have received through local development fund, yes. Let's make sure that when it comes to the buildings, we utilize all the resources that are there and make sure that that infrastructure is there. The second thing is taking care of infrastructure. And here I'll be talking about issues of especially vandalism, which is very high. You have schools that were of a certain standard at a certain point. But you find that there are no desks are kind of messed up, you have windows that are, you know, everything is destroyed. Because there hasn't been that level of ownership when it comes to the users of that particular infrastructure.
And the understanding usually is the government is going to come and replace, or they are going to refurbish this building. So there also has to be that level of ownership. Yes, we already have infrastructure which is not in good shape. We also have to make sure that when we're using that infrastructure, we're also using it at least responsibly. Talk of books. Libraries. Most of the libraries in schools, when they're being opened, they have very good books, up-to-date books. I can even talk about Chancellor College. I was there. One of the things that is very interesting about books at Chancellor College, especially those in high demand, are missing pages. So you have a very good book. My papa knows very well. You have a very good book that is being used by about 200 students. Someone decided that they were too cheap to photocopy. Let's just call it that way. They were too cheap to photocopy, and they decided to remove the pages. So you have a book that has pages from 80, and then you have 120. There are 40 pages that are somewhere missing. So that's a disservice actually to the users of that particular. So there has to be that level of responsibility in many aspects for the users of the services. Parents. There also has to be, I don't know how that can be done though, that parents have to be really involved, especially when it comes to the education system. There are committees, yes, that have been put in place, but still, there are some parents that just don't feel like this is their thing. All they know is they send a child to school, and the child comes back, and that's it. There are specific people that they believe are supposed to be in those committees. So there has to be also that level of responsibility. The final thing is the private sector. There are a lot of things I believe the private sector can do to also help with the education system. Press Trust does a very good job in donating of school materials, of also constructing infrastructure. Going beyond that, if there was a way, and this is a very weird idea, of the private sector adopting some of the schools and taking care of the, say, for example, allowances of teachers, I think that would help. I'm saying this because of the issues of delays of allowances, delays of salaries. So teachers, are human beings. You can't stay for 2 months without a salary. What are you going to be doing? You have a teacher who's frustrated. They're going to be beating students, obviously, because they're frustrated. If there could be someone who would come and say, for example, take a certain percentage of their salary, a particular school, a particular community, maybe that might also help us to access quality education.
Yeah.
Yes, finally. Okay. I just want a lot of people to know that without education we cannot advance or progress to another level that we desperately need as a country here in Malawi. Most of the societies that we know today as great nations, for example France or Britain or America, it's because they had a revolution in education system. They had to generate more knowledge. Even the ancient societies, for example, Greece or Rome, at some point they had to invest in knowledge, generating new knowledge. So I think if as a country we can say, okay, let us invest. Let us not just take education as a process where you get a certificate and then you get a job and then you feed your family or you buy stuff. But we need to look at education as a process where we can generate knowledge to face the challenges that we are experiencing right now. Then I think we can do a great job for our country. We can do justice to our country. Now, what I can propose is that we should not just put the blame squarely on government, because it's not reasonable. The government cannot manage everything, every challenge, every problem that we are facing as a country. But we need to share the problem. Let us remove the donors in the equation. Let's just imagine there are no donors. What can we do as a country? So one, I think the parents have to be ready to pay for a quality education for their kids. These are their kids. These are not children for the government. They are their kids. You see? So the parents, they have to be ready to bear the burden if they want the fruits from their kids. And then the students, when they're going into education system, they should remove that mentality to say, I'm going to get a job at some point. But they have to go into the education system to get knowledge. So they have to specifically know what they're going to get from the education system. And I would advise most of the students to focus on creativity, and innovation, because that is the only thing that can bring progress. If you are creative, if you are innovative, you can play around with any experiences that you are facing and then make something good out of it. So on the financing, because I know that's where the problem is, financing the education. So I would just advise the government to privatize part of the education system, to say, okay, what if we find private institutions or private companies to disperse loans. These loans should not come from the government coffers. No, it has to be like a business firm to say, we disperse loans. Anyone who wants loans to finance education, we are here and we're going to support. They have to come up with some mechanisms or conditions of how they're going to get their money back. That's not the problem of the government. Maybe the government can just overlook to say, how are you creating these policies in order that maybe they don't charge exorbitantly on the people. And also, the government, I'm not saying the government should just stop and say, okay, we have private institutions overseeing the loans, but the government should spend some money in developing infrastructure. These are, if you look at the University of Malawi, it's a property for the government. So they have to invest in that property as well. I think Mr. Zapata also talked about infrastructure development. We want more people to be educated. And we need infrastructure. We need quality materials. In the laboratories, we need to find apparatuses there. I don't know if that's the right way. You see? So we need books in the libraries. And we also need good teachers, well paid. And then on the salaries, I think I remember, we have, I don't know if these guys are given contracts. Because if you are given a contract to say, this is what we're going to pay you at this period of time, let them honor it. Okay? At some point, maybe it can be revised. Yes, so I think by that we can eliminate these. You cannot just wake up and say, I want you to pay me this kind of money. Where is the government going to get that kind of money? So there has to be specific conditions to say, we are employing you at this period of time, we're going to be paying you this. So if you want, you can go by it. If you don't want, then you can go. So I think by that, there are some things we cannot maybe control. For example, maybe there's like the academic freedom issue. We couldn't control that. We cannot say the strikes will stop completely, but there are some things that we can, especially the salary thing, we can control that.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mafuliro.
One of the things that I think also is very important is when it comes to financing, there is money that is indicated in the budget that the government says they're going to give to the education sector or any other sector, and the actual money that they give that particular sector. So you might have 18% of the budget they say is going to go to the education sector. But when it comes to the actual disbursement,
What is it doing?
you get about 9% or 7%. So there also has to be honoring of that commitment. When it's 18%, let's make sure that the 18% really gets into that sector.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for your time. On that note, we've come to the end of this program of Frontiers, where we've discussed the education sector in the country. We've looked at the problems facing the sector and also proposed solutions that can help Malawi achieve a better quality education system. On this program, we also expect to hear from you. You can use our Facebook page, Timveni TV, where you can comment about Frontiers and give your views on how best as a country we can develop, because without education then we are pulling back our country in so many ways. You have been with me, Ezrina Kamaliza. Keep watching Timveni TV.